Hello and good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing today? While I get set up over here, why don't you leave me a message and let me know how your week has gone, what you've been up to, and how things are going. Okay, let me see. All right. Let's just wait for a few more people to join us before we get started properly. Leave me a message, say hi, let me know where you're tuning in from. Good morning, Joyce. Thank you for joining us this morning. And let me know how your week has gone, what you guys have been up to, what has excited you. Hi, Pastor Shin. Hey, Pastor Shin, I'm going to message you after this live stream. All right. Morning, Kok Lian. Hi, hope you had a good morning meditation session with JP. So been a bit of a busy week this week, looking at the sort of calendar of events for the upcoming year, and then sorting out social media and all of that stuff. So I don't know if you guys have seen the recent updates and things to the Sam Rinpoche Facebook fan page. There will be more updates and new things coming soon, so do keep your eyes peeled for that. Also, I think Karen recently posted updates to the Sam Rinpoche Relic Stupa news group, so there are updates there as well for you guys. And if you haven't already done so, do make sure to sign up to volunteer for the mantra rolling. There are activities for people outside of Selangor and the Klang Valley and all of that happening in KFR, and then there's activities happening in Taman Tun as well if you are within the CMCO borders. But yeah, there are things happening in TTDI in Taman Tun. So if you guys do want to volunteer for the mantra rolling and volunteer for that, get in touch with Louise. All right. What else is happening? Oh yeah, so the CMCO has been extended to what, December 6th, I think. So for those of you who are tuning in who are not from Malaysia, CMCO is I think it's conditional movement control order. I don't know, I've lost track of all the acronyms, but basically it's our kind of version of restricted movement. So apparently it's been extended for another month to December the 6th. And it now involves all states except for Pahang, Perlis and Kelantan. Correct me if I'm wrong. So yeah, kind of the wisdom of Rinpoche advising people to move to Bentong makes itself more and more clear as time passes, right? But since the Sam Rinpoche Mantra retreat is postponed to December 11th to the 13th, hopefully by that point, the CMCO will be lifted and people will actually be able to join us for the mantra retreat. So if you haven't signed up already, please sign up. I can tell you this from personal experience that the mantra retreat is a very, very refreshing 3 days of just being able to sit there and recite Rinpoche's name mantra. Excuse me. And just focus on the visualization and just focus on the Guru Yoga of Sam Rinpoche. So that was a really refreshing 3 days that the staff, or some of the staff members at Kechara Forest Retreat just did. All right, so if you guys do have an opportunity to sign up, please make sure to make the time for it. It is the first ever public, I say public as in non-staff, Sam Rinpoche Mantra Retreat for everyone to join in, all right? So today's session is going to be a little bit different. Good morning, Xiao Li, and good morning, Suk Fan. Thank you for joining us this morning. So today is going to be a little bit different. Oh, Joyce says the incense looks good. Yes, it does look good. It smells even better than it looks. This incense is actually red crystal. So red crystal was one of the incense fragrances that Rinpoche liked. So that's what I burned. Rinpoche also liked it because the stick is very long, and Rinpoche used to offer incense very frequently on the altar at Rinpoche's desk. That's why Rinpoche had the altar at the desk. And Rinpoche always made sure that the incense burner was like within arm's reach, so Rinpoche could constantly be offering incense. But Rinpoche liked the red crystal one, not just for the fragrance, but also for the length, because the fact that it's very long means that you don't have to offer as many times, like the incense burns for a longer time. If you have like really short sticks of incense, they burn out very quickly, so you have to keep replacing it. So Rinpoche liked the length of red crystal. All right, so before we get started for today, going to do a short prayer to ascribe the source of the information that's going to be shared on today's live stream. All right, so I go for refuge in my Lama, from whom I received these teachings. I go for refuge in the lineage Lamas, from whom my Lamas received these teachings. All right, so thank you very much everyone for joining me today. Hello, good morning to Liman. Before we get started, I'm going to do a quick recap of what we covered last week. And last week, the specially requested topic that we talked about was idle chatter. So idle chatter last week I defined as being words that are spoken with no purposeful intent at all. So speech that is pointless, speech that lacks depth or lacks purpose, speech that communicates nothing of value, and speech or words that only stir up the defilements or the delusions in our mind. So last week I also talked about how idle chatter isn't necessarily just confined to gossip. It can be confined to, it's speech that covers a whole gamut, whole range of things. For example, entertainment, even philosophical discussions. And I talked last week about how and why philosophical discussions can fall under the umbrella of idle chatter. All right, so idle chatter is when we utter anything that comes immediately into our head and we say it or we utter it. Good morning, Agi. Oh, tashi dele kunga debo imbe. All right, so idle chatter is anything that we utter that comes into our head and we say it without thought or we say it without intent. It's when we sit around and we talk to fill the silence, which I know a lot of us do. I know sometimes some of us get very nervous and we engage in nervous chatter, nervous speech just to fill the silence, or we are trained to think that if we meet somebody new, if we don't fill the silence with a lot of conversation, that somehow the other person might be offended or upset. Idle chatter can be saying anything without a sense of responsibility. And idle chatter is also includes things that are non-verbal. So it's not just speech, like verbal speech, but also even if we're typing or texting someone and it's typed or texted. Is there such a word? Yeah, it's texted without any real purpose or any real intent. So basically for entertainment's sake, just to discuss something that has no real direction. So basically it's any kind of speech, whether it's verbal or typed or texted, written, that doesn't add or contribute or further our goal of reaching or gaining enlightenment. All right, so basically anything under that banner, right? Good morning, King Ho. Yeah, so last week I also talked about whether idle chatter is always bad. In a conventional sense, not necessarily, not all the time, because there are moments when idle chatter, for example, just like water cooler talk at work, social chit-chat, has the result of fostering or nurturing a sense of togetherness or belonging or camaraderie. So it's not always necessarily bad, but in that situation when that's all we do and that's all we engage in, it can spiral out of control. So it's something that we need to watch and something that we need to be aware of. And then last week also, I also talked about how if we're engaging in idle chatter, how we can reduce it. What are some of the methods and tools that we can reduce it? And so one of the tools that Rinpoche taught about how we can reduce idle chatter is to reflect on our minds and to reflect on our speech and to reflect on what triggers us to engage in idle chatter. And then once we've identified those triggers, to apply the antidote. So, for example, if it's mental agitation, if we're always bored, if we're always looking for something to occupy our minds with, and so that's why we're constantly texting people to get into conversation with them, because we want to be entertained. The antidote to that, for example, will be engaging in something that challenges us or compels us or encourages us to focus out. So, charity work, volunteering in a soup kitchen, for example, or volunteering in an empowerment center. For example, volunteering in your Dharma center, of course, doing retreats, doing social work, things like that, things that naturally in that environment guide us to focus out. And so when our time is being used and our mental space and energy is being used to focus on other people, we direct less energy into that sense of, oh my God, I'm so bored and I need to do something to entertain myself. Another possible trigger for us to engage in idle chatter is, for example, insecurity. So not being at ease with our neutral self. So when we're sitting in silence, are we very uncomfortable with that silence? And the antidote to that would be meditation. So practicing being alone, sitting with yourself, being alone, and just focusing on the breath. All right. Also reciting mantras. So instead of using our speech to fill the silence, we can use using our speech to engage in idle chatter or to engage in nervous chatter to fill the silence. We can use our speech instead to recite mantras. And I gave the example last week of a Kechara that I had seen in between events. Instead of him kind of sitting around and socializing with everyone, he'd be off in the corner alone in the Gomba, doing some kind of practice, whether it was prostrations or whether it was mandala offerings or doing mantra recitations. So that's one way that we can counter idle chatter. I also talked about how we can... good morning, Esther. I also talked about how we can counter idle chatter as taught by Rinpoche by meditating on the disbenefits of engaging idle chatter. So, for example, thinking and being aware of the fact that idle chatter is communication, and so communication happens two ways. It requires another party. And so when you engage in idle chatter, think and meditate. What are the disbenefits of me engaging in this? What habits am I encouraging in somebody else? What attitudes am I reinforcing in someone else? What kind of behaviors am I enabling in somebody else? Are those behaviors going to be positive or going to be negative for them? Will they be harmful or will they be beneficial? And so, as an extension of that, realizing that as people who are pursuing spirituality, or being that we want to be considered spiritual people, that we have a sense of responsibility to foster and encourage spiritual thinking in somebody else. And it doesn't mean that we have to be a monk or a nun. It doesn't mean that we have to be a pastor or anything like that in order to encourage or foster spiritual thinking in somebody else. That even as lay practitioners, it is possible to encourage spirituality in somebody else's mind and in somebody else's life. All right. And then the last tool that I talked about last week, or shared last week, about how we can engage, we can reduce idle chatter in our lives, is something that I experienced and also observed Rinpoche encouraging in people, which is for people to engage in silent retreat. Because being in silent retreat compels us to be more aware, trains us to be more aware of how automatically we are, or how automatic our tendency is to speak. And so when we're in silent retreat, we don't talk about anything or text or write down anything that isn't directly related to work. And if somebody asks us a question, at most you answer it with a yes or a no. All right, so no additional things. And so when you're in silent retreat and you do a silent retreat more and more often, whether it's more in frequency or greater duration, that when we're out of silent retreat, we realize just how much and how automatically we speak, and how much a lot of what we speak is without purpose or without intent. All right. So someone had asked last week, James, I believe, had asked last week about duration. So what is a recommended duration? What is the duration that Rinpoche recommended in terms of how long we should engage in silent retreat for, if that is what we are interested in? And I had explained to James last week that it really depends. So it really depends on the depth of or how deeply rooted our habit is. So for some people whose speech is particularly harmful, and it may not be the intent for it to be harmful, but it's become habituated to be that way, that sometimes Rinpoche would instruct them to be in silent retreat for much longer than other people. But for us as lay practitioners, you can start with an hour. Start with an hour of thinking, for this hour, I won't speak apart from anything that's related to Dharma. And then extend that hour to another hour. And then build that hour up. And make it longer, longer, longer. And if it's not possible to do it throughout the week because we have to work, because now during lockdown, people are on Zoom calls, and if you're on a Zoom call in the meeting, you know, you can't just sit there and be like, well, I'm on silent retreat, I can't talk. And it's not something that most people may necessarily understand. Make a point, try and do it on weekends. Little and often is better than a lot but infrequently. All right, so maybe you can make it a part of your practice every weekend, something like that. All right, so that was last week. Good morning, David. All right, so that was the topic that was covered last week. Before I get into this week, just want to thank the sponsors of today's talk, who are, first one, still being anonymous, who would like to dedicate their contribution to the following. May obstacles be cleared so that His Eminence, the 25th Sam Rinpoche students, can swiftly find the incarnation. Thank you to Anonymous. The next sponsor of today's talk is Stacey Isidro, who would like to dedicate her contribution to virtues to great enlightenment for all sentient beings. Thank you very much, Stacey. This week also we have Linny as a sponsor of today's sharing, who would like to dedicate her contribution to all sentient beings. And we also have this week Esther Go as a sponsor of today's sharing, who would like to dedicate her contribution to all sentient beings. May they be free from pain and sufferings. So thank you guys very much for your contributions and for your support. If you would like to sponsor a talk or support a talk, there is a link, on the contribution, on the comment section? No, on the description section of this video, where people can make their contributions. So thank you very much, because your support, like I say every week, your support does help us to make these online sharings available. And now that CMCO has been extended, now that lockdown 2.0 is happening in the UK and so on, it seems ever more necessary for us to stick with online sharings, right? So this week, I thought that I would do something a little different, because there have been some questions that have been sent to me which have been sitting around for a while, so I thought I'd kind of collect them and then answer them all in one go. All right, so remember, if you guys do have questions, please feel free to leave them for me in the comment section of the video on Facebook, even on YouTube, and I will get around to answering them hopefully sooner rather than later. All right, so the reason why I picked these questions to answer this week is because I know that there are people to whom this applies to, and so hopefully the answers will be useful to you as well. And the first question that was asked this week is the following. I wish to do mantra retreat from where I am. I'm in the USA. Is there a way someone can post Rinpoche's mantra and how to say it? Thanks. So as you may or may not know, I don't know if you know, for those of you watching this, but the instructions for how to do the Sam Rinpoche mantra retreat are actually on Rinpoche's blog, which is www.samrinpoche.com. All right, so that post is complete. It has everything from the prayers to recite, the sequence of the prayers to recite. It's got an explanation of the visualizations, what we should engage in, at which point we should engage them. We should engage in them. It's got a commentary on why it's important for us as Rinpoche students to engage in a mantra retreat. It's got pictures of the altar setup, so that's something that you can do from home, and so on. So the post is very, very complete, right? Talks about the benefits of engaging in such a retreat as well. As for Rinpoche's name mantra, that's also on the blog post. But Rinpoche's name mantra is Om A Guru Kiti Daza Shasana Dara Virya Siddhi Hong Hong. Om A Guru Kiti Daza Shasana Dara Virya Siddhi Hong Hong. Om A Guru Kirti Daza Shasana Dara Virya Siddhi Hong Hong. Alright, so if you have trouble pronouncing the mantra, you can revisit this live stream after it's over, replay it back, and then copy it. What Rinpoche has taught us before is that Tibetan Sanskrit is not our first language. So obviously, when we are starting to learn the prayers, that there will be mispronunciations along the way. Don't worry. Rinpoche said that the key aspect to our prayers being effective is our sincerity. It doesn't mean that we can continue to mispronounce the prayers forever. We should make every effort to learn the pronunciation and to learn the accurate pronunciation, all right? We should make every effort to not miss out syllables when we are reciting the prayers. We should make every effort to be able to recite them beautifully. Why? Because when we recite, our speech also becomes an offering. So if we can sing it beautifully, if we can pronounce it accurately, it's a very good offering that we're making, because it's the offering of effort. However, if we can't pronounce it properly, or we are starting out and we are mispronouncing it, don't worry, the Buddhas won't be offended, and it's not like the Buddhas will not understand what it is that you're trying to pray for. All right? So Rinpoche said that the key aspect to prayers being effective is sincerity. So try your best to pronounce it accurately. Practice, all right? There is definitely a lot of information that is on Rinpoche's blog. Thank you very much, Joyce, for posting the link. There is definitely a lot of information on Rinpoche's blog, which people should definitely go and check out, because we get a lot of questions from people, and more often than not, the answers are already on the blog. All right, so have a look at the blog. Rinpoche made sure that it's an entire corpus of Dharma teachings that is more than enough to last us for this entire lifetime if we were to practice it fully. Okay? All right, so that's the first question. Now, the second question this week links into the sharing that I gave on regret many weeks ago. And the question from this person is, one of my biggest regret is that I didn't find the drama. Oh, I think they meant Dharma. They wrote drama. So what if my biggest regret is that I didn't find the Dharma sooner? I'm very grateful that I have come to the Dharma. Please don't get me wrong, but I have spent years wandering around in the ocean of religious confusion, and I wish I had been in the Dharma much sooner. Thank you for this talk. So the first thing I want to say is, oh, good morning, Penny. So the first thing I want to say is, it's better late than never. All right. So don't get stuck or don't get hung up on the sense of regret that you didn't find Dharma sooner. For all of us, we started considerably late. 12, 13, 14, 15, some of us in our 20s, some of us in our 30s, some of us in our 40s. So you're not the only person who has started or who met Dharma very late. But better late than never. And don't get stuck or hung up on the sense of regret. But rather, the question we should consider is, now that we're here, what are we going to do with the time that we have left? How are we going to use the regret that we feel for having met Dharma later, and how are we going to use the gratitude that we feel for having met the Dharma at all in order to fuel and to propel our practice? So what Rinpoche always asked us to do was to meditate on how much time has passed and how much time we have left, and ask ourselves, do we know how much time we have left? So as the famous saying goes, if not now, when? Right? So do we know how much time we have left? And do we know how much time we have left in order to engage in Dharma practice? And since we don't know when the moment of our death will come, why then are we delaying our practice? Or why then are we delaying more, and why are we delaying deeper practice? Why are we finding excuses not to practice? And why are we delaying any kind of transformation that we need to make with our habits and with ourselves? So that is what Rinpoche always reminded us of. So Rinpoche would say, how much time do you have left? Let's say you are somebody who is in your 30s. Realistically, best case scenario, assuming that our karma to be in this lifetime doesn't run out within the next hour, within the next few days or so on. Realistically, we have 30, 40, 50 years left if we're in our 30s. If you're in your 40s, you have 40, 30 years left. We don't know, all right? So we need to ask ourselves, what will we do to make sure that we do more Dharma in the upcoming years, more so than all the Dharma that we've done in the previous years put together? How much Dharma practice, how much Dharma transformation, how much Dharma work have we done? And is the amount that we're doing growing year by year, or are we finding that year by year it's reducing? Are we finding that year by year we are getting more distant? Are we finding that year by year we are finding it more easy to come up with excuses not to engage in practice? Oh, my children, it starts when you're young. Oh, my children, it starts earlier. So my children are young, so I need to take care of them. So I can't go to the center as often. Or my children are young, I need to spend more time with them. So I will do the shorter version of my sadhana rather than the regular sadhana. Then when they get older, I need to, now that they've gone to college, I need to focus and build up and save for my retirement. So I can't spend as much time doing retreats. I will do it when I get older. But the thing is, not everyone is lucky enough or has the merit to grow old. And so since not everyone has the merit to grow old, maybe we don't have the merit to grow old. So we may never have that chance to engage in retreats. We may say that we will do it when we get older, but that moment may never come. All right, so if we know what regret feels like, because we regret having found the Dharma so late, let's use our time now so that in 20, 30, 40, 50 years' time, we don't look back on this moment now. We don't look back on the years that have passed with regret, thinking, I should have spent my time in a much more productive way. Why? Because at this moment, we're already thinking, since I met Dharma so late, since I met Dharma in my 30s and my 40s, I already wasted 30 or 40 years. Do you want to find yourself in 30, 40 years' time, looking back and thinking, I should have spent the last 30, 40 years doing more practice? All right, so since we already know what regret feels like now, do we want to experience that same regret in 30 years' time? The example I gave to somebody the other day, when they were kind of, like umming and ahhing and hesitant about participating in the mantra volunteering, was I actually heard people during the last session, when we were making Rinpoche's indoor relic stupa, I heard some people saying, I should have come sooner, not come so late, because now that I've come so late, a lot of the work's already done, so I don't get to do that much with the stupa. So automatically there was already regret. All right, so the example I gave to this person who was kind of like umming and ahhing and reluctant and hesitating about engaging in the mantra rolling volunteering was, the sooner you start, the more mantras you end up rolling, which means that by the time the stupa comes around, you can feel really good about yourself saying that, I managed to roll 1,000 mantras, and 1,000 of the mantras that I rolled are going into the stupa, as opposed to not volunteering, and then when the stupa's being, filled and everything, then you're like, I should have volunteered sooner because now I can only roll one mantra to put inside the stupa. All right, so that is an example that is very, very accessible, relevant, and understandable to us now, that we have the Relic Stupa project in front of us, all right? That is my answer to that person's second question, which is that how do we deal with that regret that we experience for having found or met the Dharma so late? My answer to that would be, number one, better late than never. Number two, now that we are aware or conscious of regret, what are we going to do to ensure that we don't experience that same sense of regret in 30, 40, 50 years' time? And if we are fortunate enough to have found the Dharma sooner, if we are fortunate to have found the Dharma when we're very young, what is it that we're going to do to ensure that we don't experience that level of regret when we're older? And actually, come to think of it, if we are very familiar with regret now, what is it that we can do to share with other people so that they don't experience regret when they are older? All right, since we are familiar with that emotion, since we're familiar with that feeling, and we know what it's like, and we don't like it, and we don't find it particularly pleasurable, what is it that we can share with other people so that they don't have to go through the same experience when they're older? All right, so that's the answer to the second question. I'm in my 50s, time passes fast. It really does. It feels like a slog, whilst you're actually in the moment. But when you look back, you realize, oh my God. For me, oh my God, it's been 34 years since I was born. I've been on this earth for 34 years. What have I accomplished in these 34 years? And if I were to close my eyes tonight and never wake up again, would I be proud of what I have accomplished in the last 34 years? What is it that I'm proud of that I've done in the last 34 years? And if I were to have the opportunity to have many more years ahead of me, what will I do with that time? Yeah, it's very true. Time passes really, really fast. All right, so now let's move on to the third question. You know what? I might actually finish within the hour this week. Okay, so let's move on to the third question, because the third question is much longer. And the last question is kind of in three parts. So I'll read it out first, and then I'll break it down, and then I'll answer it part by part. All right? So the question is, can you please cover as a topic how Buddhism views people born with disabilities? I know it was past karma opening, but if you look at my life, I must also have a lot of merit because I have overcome a lot in life. Being new to Dharma, this is kind of confusing for me. Also, I'm very close to complete healing. Is there any other practice I can do to aid in that? And how much would a KH or Kechara house puja request cost in US dollars for that? Thanks. So, the first part of the question would be, how does Buddhism view people born with disabilities? Now, Buddhism views that everything and anything that we experience is the product and result of karma. All right? So, excuse me. So whether or not we are somebody with a very healthy body, or we are someone who is always beset by illnesses, or someone who experiences a lot of physical challenges, even something as mundane as a runny nose. Some people have constantly runny noses, have a whole ton of allergies, and constantly sneezing. Other people have absolutely no problems at all. Even something like that is the product and result of karma. So regardless of whatever it is, Buddhism views everything and anything as the product and result of karma. That's the first thing that we need to understand. This isn't about passing judgment. This isn't about saying that a particular state or a particular existence or way of being is good or bad. Saying that something is the product and result of karma is simply a descriptor. It's simply describing a mechanic, that something happened, we did something, or we engaged in something in a previous life that led us to have the result that we're experiencing now, that led us to have the experience that we're having now. All right, so Rinpoche shared before, this happened when we're actually on pilgrimage in Bodh Gaya. So during that time, it being India, there is abject poverty everywhere. And there are a lot of people everywhere who are suffering greatly, immensely, in a physical way. Some people look fit, some people do not. Some people have disabilities, some people do not. And so what Rinpoche explained at that time is that one of the causes to take such a rebirth is that in a previous life, a person who's having the experience must have sold, for example, must have sold statues for profit. All right? Or sold Buddha statues or sold Buddha images for profit. Not because they were making it as a religious act or an act of faith or as a practice, but they engaged in it for profit. And so that created the causes for people who are having that physical experience to take rebirth in such a way. Now, it's not about saying that it's good or bad. It's just a descriptor that cause has effect. That to have such a result, we must have created a cause in a previous life. All right. So in the same way, in previous lives, for some, it's the same thing. It's the same thing that applies to, for example, wealth. For example, people who are very rich in this life, they created the causes to have a lot of wealth in this life, perhaps by being very generous in a previous life. People who smell very good all the time, who never seem to stink no matter how much they sweat, for example, in a previous life, they held their vows very well. For example, Dusin Drakpa Gyaltsin, Vinaya holder, who is said to have emitted a very fragrant smell. All right, so another example that Rinpoche gave was for people in this life who are always sick, always experience a lot of sickness. Perhaps it could be in a previous life that they destroyed a lot of towns and they destroyed a lot of villages, and so the result was experiencing a lot of sickness in this life. All right, so it's not about good or bad. It's not about passing judgment. It's a descriptor, and it's about saying that what we did in a previous life, with the circumstances and the choices that we had back then, created a karma for us to experience a certain result now. Okay, so that is how Buddhism would view disabilities, is that in order to have such an experience now, there must have been a cause that was created in a previous time. So knowing that, we can also use it as a source of meditation for ourselves. So understanding that I'm having this experience now, what can I do in order to have a different one in a future life? What can I do in order to have a body that's strong and healthy in a future life? So if the cause for having such a difficult physical experience now, for experiencing disability or experiencing so much illness now, is that, for example, we sold statues for profit in previous life, then we know the antidote to that is the opposite, which is sponsor statues as much as we can, make as many Buddha images, make as many tatas, print as many Buddha images as we can, and give it away to people, and connect them with the three jewels. If we're in a position to do so, to engage in purification practices, for example, prostrations, circumambulations. All right, so we can use the experience that we're having now as a source of meditation so that we can create the causes for us to have a different experience in a future life. Also understanding that there are people like me, or that there are people worse off than me. What is there that I can do in order to ease their suffering and in order to alleviate their suffering, in order to ease their experience? How can I be an advocate, for example? How can I be an advocate for them? Or understanding that my experience may be this now, temporarily. I could be having a totally different one in the future. So maybe my experience in the future may be more difficult. For example, maybe I may take rebirth in the lower realms. Maybe I may take rebirth in the hell realms. Understanding that my experience may also be easier physically. So I may take rebirth in the God realms, for example, the Deva realms. But my experience will be different. All right, the experience I'm having now may not always be the same. It won't always be the same. It will change. So the experience I'm having now is temporary. Given that I understand that the experience I'm having now is temporary, what is it that I can do now in order to ensure that I have an optimal human rebirth in the future? What is it that I can do now in order to ensure that in the future I take rebirth with a strong, healthy body? So whatever experience it is that we're having can always be used as a source of meditation. That is the approach that Buddhism would have towards disabilities. And also think, if we're somebody who doesn't have, who is born with a strong and healthy body, we also need to think that if I have a strong and healthy body now, the fact is that the state that I'm experiencing now is also temporary. I can get sick. I'm going to get old. I'm going to pass away. I can get injured. At any moment, I can get injured. If I'm walking outside and I'm not aware, I may trip and fall and break a leg. I may miss a step and twist my ankle, which I have done before. I could be unaware. Somebody could be walking past me, bump into me whilst they're carrying something heavy. It drops or it falls on my hands. I have a broken arm, so on. All right. So if you have a strong and healthy body now, the fact that we have a strong and healthy body now is also in itself a temporary experience. So knowing that, what is it that we can do in order to create the causes to continue to have such experiences in future lives? And what is it that we can do in order to help ease other people's situation? Because we have a strong and healthy body now, how can we help and how can we facilitate other people to engage in deeper and more spiritual practice? All right. So on the side of people who are without disabilities, who do not have that experience, it means that we have a responsibility to act with care and to act with compassion and to act with empathy, and not to conduct ourselves in a manner that excludes people. All right? All of us, we need to realize that all of us have taken rebirth in myriad forms, and that at some point or another in our countless previous lives, we did take rebirth with illnesses, we did take rebirth with injuries, we did take rebirth with bodies that present us with challenges in navigating the world around us. All right? And we will continue to take rebirth in future lives with such an experience. So, therefore, how can we make it possible for people to practice? And we also need to remember that Buddhism doesn't exclude and doesn't preclude anyone. Buddhism doesn't exclude people from practice simply because they don't have the same experience as everybody else. All right? So, for example, Rinpoche actually taught this a couple of months before Rinpoche entered Parinirvana. And you can find it on the blog under the teaching called Bigger and More Buddha Statues is Better. In that blog post, Rinpoche also explained to us that there are some people who have taken rebirth who are unable to speak. So since people are unable to speak, how is it possible for them to recite mantras? How is it possible for them to purify karma related to speech? How is it possible for them to generate merit related to speech? And within Buddhism, there are avenues for that. For example, mental recitation. So some people, because they don't have the ability to speak, they can mentally read the mantra over and over again. And in doing that, they can actually generate merit from mentally reciting mantra. It's called mental or mind recitation, right? Now, it doesn't mean that for the rest of us who are able to speak, that it's a cop-out, that we can just keep reading the same word over and over again and it generates merit, all right? Doesn't work like that, okay? If you can speak, please recite the mantra, all right? But there are methods for people who are not able to speak in order to generate merit. For example, mind recitation. For example, spinning prayer wheels. For example, circumambulating around money stones. All right? Even sponsoring money stones. Okay? So, if we are in the position where we have taken rebirth with a healthy body, it also behooves us to make it possible and to help to facilitate people's spiritual practice if they have physical challenges that they need to contend with, all right? Because our faith itself, Buddhism itself, does not exclude and does not preclude people simply because they don't have the same physical experience as others, all right? Good morning, Sharon. Oh yeah, Joyce, thank you for reminding me. I was really struggling to think of that phrase, this past week, but yes, differently abled. All right, so that answers the first part of this person's question, is how does Buddhism view people who are born with disabilities? That it's a descriptor, that it's a product or result of karma, and that it as an experience can be used as a source of meditation for us. All right. Then the second part of this person's question. I know it was past karma opening, but if you look at my life, I must also have a lot of merit because I have overcome a lot in life. Being new to Dharma, this is kind of confusing for me. So what I want to say is that you are right. You have a lot of merit because you came to be connected to the Dharma. But what I would like to say is, and this is a reminder for everyone, is that karma isn't mutually exclusive from merit. Karma does not exist independently of merit. So to have the karma, to have such an experience, to have the karma to be differently abled, doesn't mean that we don't have merit. All right? We have karma to experience a whole host of things, to have a whole host of different experiences, because we're not Buddhas yet. We are still controlled by karma. At the same time, we also have the merit in order to find the path, in order to be on the path, and in order to stay on the path. And by path, I mean Dharma practice, all right? So, societally speaking, excuse me, societally speaking, we tend to think of disabilities, or we tend to think of being differently able as being something negative, because we live in an ableist world, all right? That's the reality of the world that we live in, that people generally are ableist, and we generally take for granted the fact that we can navigate this world without thinking too much about how we're going to do it. But if we change our perception and we change our thinking, being differently abled could also be the result of merit and a way to create merit. And I know you must be thinking that this sounds very strange, because if I'm differently able, surely it must be the result of negative karma. But that's not the case. Why? Because for some people, perhaps if they had had a strong and healthy body, they would have been disinterested in practice, because they would have had the physical ability or capacity to engage more deeply with samsara. Perhaps if some people had taken rebirth with a strong and healthy body, they would not have been compelled to pursue spiritual practice, to find a reason why they were born differently abled. Perhaps the fact that somebody is born differently abled could be used as a means of compelling and nurturing deeper spiritual practice, because it's a result of merit, because it nurtured us and guided us to think, why is it I took rebirth with such a physical experience? Why is it I took rebirth to have such a physical experience? All right. So maybe having this experience has compelled us to find the reason why. Maybe having such an experience has compelled us to pursue spirituality. Maybe having such an experience has compelled us to investigate and to connect with the three jewels, and to connect with Dharma, and to connect with our teacher. Now, when I say this, I don't say this with the intent to reduce or to infantilize or to be like, oh hey, you know what, life is a bed of roses. Why not just, it's not simplistic. I'm not trying to have a simplistic approach to being differently able, because the same thing about how using our experience as a means, being a result of merit, can also apply to things which outwardly appear to be positive. For example, having a lot of money can be like having a healthy body. Some people use a healthy body to pursue Dharma practice. Some people use illness to pursue Dharma practice. Conversely, some people use a healthy body to pursue deeper samsara. Some people use an unhealthy body to pursue deeper samsara. Alright? So some people use poverty to pursue samsara because they're constantly worried about not having enough money. And so poverty becomes fuel for them to constantly focus on finding money, so they can't focus on spiritual practice. Conversely, some people use wealth as a means of furthering and deepening their samsara, because with wealth, they have financial access to a more self-gratifying lifestyle. All right? So the point isn't whether it's good or bad, like I keep saying. The point is that when we have an experience, every experience that we have can be turned into a means of making more merit. Similarly, can also be viewed as the result of merit. That I had the merit to have this experience because I'm using this experience now to pursue Dharma practice. All right? If that's not clear, please let me know, and I will attempt to clarify it using different words in the comment section below. All right? I know that sometimes it doesn't feel that way. Sometimes it doesn't feel like experiences that we have may be the result of merit. Sometimes the experiences that we have may be frustrating. It may be annoying. But it's, again, an opportunity for us to change the way that we think, to change and to work on our perception, to work and change our attitude. Use it as an opportunity to learn how to deal with that bitterness that's arising, to deal with the frustration that we're experiencing, to learn to deal with the anger and annoyance. And I say this having spent many weeks in a wheelchair before. I know it's different because I know that when I was in the wheelchair, my experience of being in the wheelchair was temporary, but those weeks gave me some understanding of how much I take for granted that I'm able to easily access anywhere I want to. Those weeks gave me an experience and awareness of how frustrating it must be for some people that we don't think to facilitate or accommodate their spiritual practice just because they're differently able. I'll give you an example. Because I was in a wheelchair, it was very difficult for me to actually get into Rinpoche's room in order to assist Rinpoche. And so for many weeks, I wasn't in the position to assist Rinpoche because I just couldn't get into the room. Because why? The doorway was too narrow. Something as simple as that I wasn't aware of, that didn't matter to me, because that previously didn't matter to me because I never had that experience before. All right, so I'm not comparing a temporary situation to something that is permanent. I'm definitely not doing that. What I'm saying is that every experience can be used and can be adapted to become an opportunity for us to generate more merit from that. All right? So all of us, by the way, have an opportunity to practice. It does not necessarily mean that we need to be differently abled in order to use situations to generate merit for ourselves. All right? We don't need to be differently able in order to practice overcoming frustration, in order to practice overcoming prejudice, in order to practice overcoming jealousy and envy and so on. For example, the very famous story of Atisha. When Atisha traveled to Tibet, who is it that he chose to take with him? He didn't choose to take with him the guy that was full of praise. He didn't choose to take with him the guy that was a super yes man. He didn't choose to take with him the guy that buttered him up and praised him and put him on a pedestal. Atisha picked the person to bring to Tibet with him, who was the one person who was constantly criticizing Atisha, who was constantly bad-mouthing him and talking badly about him. Atisha took that person there. All right, so what I'm saying is that all of us need to practice. And it's a matter of using the opportunities that we have in front of us in order to do so. All right? And also, going back to what I mentioned earlier about karma, what I also want to say is that at least the karma to have such an experience is manifesting now, because it's manifesting or fruitioning in an environment or in a situation in which we have some control or some ability to do something about it or to make something of it. Imagine if the karma to have the experience had not been extinguished or had not been experienced in this lifetime, and so it fruitions in a future lifetime. As an example of this, I know of some people who are constantly sick, and it doesn't matter what they do, it seems that as soon as one illness is over, another one begins, and it goes on and on and on and on like that. Now imagine if they had that karma fruitioning in a future life, let's say as an animal. Alright, so they are constantly sick as an animal. Whether they get kennel cough, and then once they recover from kennel cough, then they get mange. Once they recover from mange, they get something else, and so on. Alright, in that position, when they no longer have the ability to seek help, no longer have the ability to explain to the vet what it is that they're experiencing, no longer have the ability to seek healing and treatment and medication. The fact that they have the experience now as a human, with all of the associated suffering and all of the associated challenges and difficulties, they still have the ability to go and look for a doctor. They still have the ability to take medication. They still have the ability to explain to the doctor what symptoms it is that they're having so that the doctor can treat them. All right? So, what I also want to say is that, and I've explained this to people who are constantly sick. So what I also want to say is that at least the karma to have such an experience is being purified now, in an environment or in a situation in which we have some control or ability to do something about it or to make something of it. All right? Because it would be much, much, much more difficult for us if we were to have that experience in an environment or situation where we have totally no control over it or no ability to mitigate circumstances then. All right? Now, finally, the part 3 of this person's question is, they also asked, I'm very close to complete healing. Is there any other practice I can do to aid in that? And how much would a Kechara house puja request cost in US dollars for that? Thanks. So that kind of highlights the point that I was making earlier about how experiences that we have can be used to motivate us to do more practice, or can be used to motivate us to engage in purification practices or engage in merit-making activities. All right. If we were not sick, would we be asking questions about how we can heal faster? You know, if people are not constant, if they're not some people who are constantly ill or facing one illness after another, will we not be asking questions? Will we be asking questions about how we can heal? If we don't experience financial difficulties or poverty from time to time, will we be asking questions or seeking out methods on how we can improve our luck, improve our business, and so on? All right. So, what practices can you do to aid, assist, expedite in healing? What Rinpoche always recommended would be Medicine Buddha. You can engage in the Medicine Buddha practice for this. Also, 35 Confessional Buddha practice is another powerful practice for purification, general purification, but also purification of karma related to the body. Depending on the extent of our situation, we can also do prostrations. We can also do circumambulations. Can also clean the temple if we have access to that. Can also roll mantras. Can also wash or paint Buddha statues or make offerings of jewels onto Buddha statues. Can also sponsor statues. That's a common that's a puja that's quite frequently prescribed to some people. Sponsoring Buddha statues or sponsoring tatsas, Buddha images. So we can do all of those things. You can also do what was recommended to me previously was Shizei's practice. So the practice of the healing aspect of Doji Shukden, which can also be found on Rinpoche's blog. And I know from personal experience that that practice is extremely effective. It was prescribed to me when I had appendicitis. I was a very, very nutritionally imbalanced vegan at the time. So what was supposed to be a simple routine laparoscopic appendectomy and I was supposed to heal within 3 days. I ended up in the hospital for like 3 weeks or something, and I had no energy and I just wasn't healing. So and I say that because I was, and I emphasize this, I was a nutritionally imbalanced vegan because literally all I ate was French fries, all right? So if you're going to go into veganism, don't do that, okay? It's nothing to do with veganism, it was to do with my poor choices. So I wasn't healing, and Rinpoche prescribed to me Shitze's practice and prescribed to me the meditation, the healing meditation of Shitze. And Rinpoche asked me to do 100,000 mantras, and it took me 3 months to do it, because I would do one mala and then I'll be out of breath and I would be exhausted, you know, and it would take me like hours to recover from it. So I did that. The funny thing is, I mean, with Rinpoche, there's no such thing as coincidence, right? But the funny thing is that the day I finished the 100,000, I had literally just finished reciting the mantra, finished reciting the dedication, and then as soon as I finished, you know, Gangri Rawe Koi Shinkam Dia Pena Dewa Malik, as soon as I finished reciting the last syllable, I picked up my phone to message Rinpoche, to update Rinpoche and let Rinpoche know that I had finished the retreat. When I picked up my phone, I immediately got a message from Rinpoche saying, meet me in Bentong. That was actually the first day in months that I had felt well enough to travel. And it was the first day, literally the first moment after I finished my retreat. So Rinpoche knew that, Rinpoche clairvoyantly knew that Shitze's practice had its result in healing me, and called me to come to Bentong to meet Rinpoche at the waterfall. So there's a picture of me with my sister, and that was my first outing after months of illness. And I went to see Rinpoche. All right, so I know from personal experience that Shitze's practice is extremely effective in healing. Okay, so for the person who actually, thank you so much, Sharon, for posting the link. So efficient. So yeah, for the person who actually asked this question, I don't know the extent to which, or the nature of the disability that you mentioned. So I would recommend you consulting with a qualified medical professional first if you decide that you want to do prostrations, if you decide that you want to do circumambulations and so on, okay? Please speak to them first, all right? But those are some practices that are available to us for purification and for healing, all right? As for the second part of your question, which was how much would a Kechara house puja request cost in US dollars, for that, you can get information for that on the Vajra Secrets website. So www.vajrasecrets.com, VAJRASECRETS, which I'm very sure Sharon is going to post on the comment section now because she's so super efficient. But there's information about puja requests on the website. And I believe if you go to the top right of the page, you can set the page so that it shows everything in US dollars, all right? So, yeah, I hope that answers your three questions, okay? Joyce, I will post up the waterfall picture later. The funny thing is that when I posted that picture up the first time, everyone was shocked at how much weight I had lost. Like literally, all the weight had dropped off me because I was so weak and so tired and so ill for months that I basically wasn't eating very much. I didn't have the energy to chew, which, I mean, ordinarily to me isn't a problem because I like eating porridge and congee and mashed potato. But weeks upon weeks of that, it was an experience. Okay, but yes, I will post a picture. But that's it from me for this week. Thank you guys very much. I hope that the answers to these questions have been useful. And like I mentioned, if you guys do have any questions that you would like answered, please let me know and I'll get around to answering them sooner rather than later, hopefully, all right? Yeah, so thank you very much for joining me this week. Just some quick reminders before I go. There you go! I knew Sharon was going to post the link. Thank you very much, Sharon, for being so efficient. But some quick reminders before I go. Tonight on the Chinese Kechara Facebook fan page, there is the Doju Shukden Sadhana at 10 p.m. Malaysian time, GMT +8. So if you guys have any requests for pujas, prayers, or offerings to be made, please leave them a message or a comment on their page. Then on Tuesday at 9:30, there's Easy Dharma for the New Normal with Pastor David. And then on Thursday at 8 p.m. on the Kecharans and Friends Facebook group. I keep having to point because it's a very long name. But on the Kecharans and Friends Facebook group, we will be live streaming on Thursday at 8 p.m. the Tsem Rinpoche Swift Return Puja. All right. So that is it from me for today. Thank you guys very much for joining me on this Sunday. Don't forget to do your dedications, which I'll do mine after the stream ends. And again, thank you so much to the 4 sponsors of today's talk, Anonymous, Linny, Stacy, and Esther. Thank you guys very much for your support for making this talk possible. All right, and like I said, your support helps us to keep making these programs available for everyone. All right, so I will see you guys same time, same place next week. Have a wonderful week ahead of you, and yeah, be kind to each other. All right, bye guys.